bear with us while we work out the details of making sure that the digital folks here can follow and get me out to the world, including on Facebook and any other of their various venues that they're going to post this along. And I'm trying to get this cord out of the way here, so pardon me while I button. There we go, we're good. So I think we're up and running. I am looking to see, hopefully it's going to pop up on my page here in a minute. I see it there. Okay, let's click away, and I think we're good to go. So we're going to spend a few minutes here just talking mostly about what's coming over the next couple of days, but more importantly, a slow walk through some of the, and just a handful of the local river gauges. I didn't get a chance to put in, for example, I don't have the tick fall in here, but I can talk about it briefly, and we'll also talk more about some of the bayous in and around Metro Baton Rouge, EBR, mostly, since that was an area where we saw a lot of the significant high water issues, and in fact are still dealing with them now. And why the high water? Well, this map really does the storyline here. Now get your bearings here. Here's Perkins Row, here's I-10 Prairieville. So we're down focusing here in Ascension Parish from Gonzales up to Prairieville. And the real issue here then is looking at double-digit rainfall that fell, much of it falling in a period of 10 hours or less across the region. And that is really kind of the whole point of why the rivers are beginning to climb. So I'm going to give us here a second here to see if a few more people join us. So bear with us while we check on a few folks. Excuse me. Yeah, I got to admit, after last night, we were here late into the night. Some of you even probably stayed with us through the night. I'm struggling a little bit. I talked so much last night that I'm still having a little bit of an issue kind of getting squared away with my voice here. So bear with me. Looks like we're getting a few people joining us now. Appreciate you logging in. How unusual was this event? Well, where you see these rainfall totals, and check this out, 13, 14, 15 inches of rain, somewhere between just north of Gonzales, up probably crossing the parish line from excuse me, Ascension into EBR. And now we're looking at events that are probably getting in the region, in the zone of maybe a 1 in 100 year event. Now keep in mind that's a relative number. It's statistically valid, but we can't be absolutely sure that it's climatologically valid, because when we create these numbers, first of all, we don't really have 100 years worth of data to come up with an analysis. And if you were trying to come up with a 100-year event in a real way, in terms of having the data to support a decision that this number represents a 100-year event, to be honest, you would need 600 or 700 years of data to do that. Well, most of these statistical analyses that we come up with, these recurrence intervals, that's what they're called, or return periods, another term you'll hear. Most of these are done on periods less than 100 years. In fact, in many cases, less than 60 or 70 years. So it's statistical magic. Now, the statistics are relatively valid. The statistical method is fine. The question is, does it apply to climate data? And the real problem here is that to use these statistical methods, you have to assume stationarity in the climate. In other words, the climate itself has stayed unchanged, and what we're looking at are these big blips in the climate over time. And the assumption is that these blips come at some sort of standard frequency over time, extended over hundreds of years, so that we can say, oh yeah, we shouldn't see 10 inches in a day more than, let's say, once every 50 years or so. Well, you've got to have a long period of data to be able to say that, because what happens if over that 50 years of data, say for Louisiana, and we know this is true, for example, in Louisiana over the last 100 years, rainfall numbers have been trending upward. A very small increase, but over 100 years, the number went up 10%. So if we're saying that these last 10 or 20 years are 10% wetter than the years at the start of the 20th century, then I think you can understand that if it's wetter now than it was then, a 10-inch rain event now is probably not quite as rare as it would have been back then. So we are assuming in the statistics that there's been no change, yet we know that the climate is always changing. So the problem then becomes, okay, how reliable are the statistics? And they're a good guideline, but let's not take these numbers to heart. And that's why many of you have probably heard me say over the years, the 1,000-year rain event for 2016, that's kind of silly. We have no way of knowing what a 1,000-year rain event would be without a couple thousand years worth of data. And I think all of you can imagine that the climate over the last 10 centuries in Louisiana has changed dramatically, given that the landscape has changed, the shape of the coastline has changed, even the Mississippi River and the Atchafalaya River and probably the Red River have changed substantially over those years. So when we assume stationarity to do the statistics, we're already entering in some measure of uncertainty. But all that said, look, 15 inches in a day is pretty uncommon. Unfortunately, it seems like maybe it's getting a little bit more common. This is the second or third time we've seen a number like that in the last 10 years, and we throw in 2016 as the sort of the test case here. But notice that this event is very different from 2016. 2016 was arguably a tropical driven event, even though it didn't get a name. It wasn't a named storm. Some people even kind of debate whether it was a tropical depression or a tropical disturbance, but bottom line is certainly it had a tropical feel to it. This event clearly not tropical whatsoever. And if you remember, the 2016 event was up here in the sort of northern EBR into northwestern Livingston Parish. That's where the core of the rains were here, oriented east to west. This event was southern EBR down into northern and central Ascension, oriented north to south. And here's another thing to consider. Had this same rain event, instead of falling here, had fallen about here over the Atchafalaya Basin, well, we wouldn't really be having this conversation. So it's not just a matter of how much fell, but where it fell. And by the way, if it had fallen over the Atchafalaya Basin, we wouldn't have a whole lot of rain gauges to really verify what the radar was showing. But most importantly, had it fallen over the Atchafalaya Basin, we would have seen far fewer properties flooded by the event. So it has to do not just with the time frame, but also the geography, the location. And in this case, it fell over the most densely populated portion of Ascension Parish and one of the heavily populated portions of East Baton Rouge Parish, and suddenly it becomes more than just news. It becomes a catastrophe. All right, so let's get on to it, and we'll move along here. I want to thank Joshua Alzine for getting this up and running for me. I couldn't do this without our digital folks. They make it all happen, so thank you guys for doing that. Working through the slides here, we broadened out this picture, and I pointed this out at 6 or 7 o'clock during that 6 to 7 o'clock window. And I just find it kind of intriguing that the biggest bullseyes, one over Metro Baton Rouge, one over Lafayette, one over Metro Lake Charles. And in the unpopulated areas, the numbers were substantially lower populated areas. The numbers tended to be substantially lower. So not only is this kind of odd that you've got 1, 2, 3 bullseyes, but how unusual is it that they all happen to sort of focus near some of our population cores in South Louisiana, adding to the demise of the rain-driven catastrophe. And by the way, you also notice that while the numbers back here over at Beaumont, Port Arthur, they're ridiculous. Those numbers are pushing maybe 20 inches or so. Still, Baton Rouge area, of the three in South Louisiana along the I-10 corridor, Baton Rouge looks like it may have gotten it the worst. Although, we're going to see even more rain back over here in the next few days as we get through Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to get some of that rain too, but it looks like the heavier rains are still going to stay off to our west over the next couple of days. All right, so here's what's going on now. Hey, how about some good news? Yep, the rains have finally come to an end across southeast Louisiana, even breaking out into some clear skies over parts of Acadiana and southwestern Louisiana. And we may see a few stars overnight tonight, although I'm not ready to say we'll be bone dry tonight, but certainly if we do have a passing sprinkle or two, that's about all that we can expect through the overnight hours. Bigger picture, here's what's left of the disturbance working its way up into Mississippi and the lingering back end of it out over the coastal waters, and that's certainly not a problem there. But you see this mess right here? That's headed our way. It's moving slowly, and the question is, what time will it get here tomorrow? It's going to hold together. I'm pretty confident of that. I think it's going to get here in the mid to late morning hours. Although a couple of our models are suggesting that this could be into the Baton Rouge area as early as sunrise. I think that might be just a little bit early. But this has prompted some watches and warnings over in Texas. You see another disturbance here sliding up through Arkansas. That's clearly not going to be a problem. And all of this mess is ultimately being driven by this big upper level low here. And what's happening is you got the large scale spin here, and it's supporting a steady southwest to northeast, or maybe west southwest to east northeast flow across the Gulf Coast states. So here goes one disturbance, here goes another, here's a third. It's these multiple disturbances, not really associated with fronts, so not something we can say is, oh yeah, that's what's creating that. These are basically mid-upper level storms, if you will, riding in the flow wrapped around that low. And the reason we're going to get more action Wednesday into Thursday is because this guy's going to take some time before it finally starts to shift off to the east and northeast and get out of our hair. And look at the array of watches in effect. This cluster here prompting thunderstorm watches for parts of northeast Texas and into Arkansas. This cluster headed our way, a series of tornado watches. Now, right now, I do think that it'll kind of lose its tornado structure, but it's certainly something we're going to have to be watching, because if you remember, Monday night into Monday evening into, actually Monday afternoon, into the evening and overnight hours, had an array of tornadoes, preliminary confirmations in Acadiana and southwestern Louisiana, and then today the Weather Service in Slidell has confirmed at least one touchdown in the New Orleans area. And I've seen multiple videos of what I would say probably were at least funnels, if not touchdowns, of systems in and around our viewing area that we just don't have sort of a firm enough signature to say, yep, that was a tornado. But if they weren't tornadoes, they were mighty, mighty close. And we've certainly seen a little bit of wind damage in the area, mainly to trees, but also to a few structures, particularly down in, again, Ascension Parish and the southern half of EBR Parish. In fact, basically for EBR Parish, all of the action was south of the interstate corridor, the 1012 corridor. North side of the interstate really didn't have much going on, but as soon as you crossed the interstate, things started to happen around the Shenandoah area, the Coursey Boulevard area, down around Jones Creek area, and then it just got more and more progressive as you moved farther south towards the parish line. All right, so yep, more rain to come Quick look at that here. I won't hold you up too long with all of this, but overnight tonight, I've got it staying mainly dry. You see that the clouds will start to break up. Here comes that disturbance out of Texas. This is the HRRR model. I'll admit that a couple of the other models have this sort of already knocking on the door in Baton Rouge by 7 a.m. I'm sticking with this slightly later arrival, which brings the action in here probably around 9 or 10 in the morning. So that means kids getting on the bus, probably dry, arrive at the school, probably dry. The morning gets a little bumpy, showers with a couple of thunderstorms, not expecting severe weather. But as we get through the late morning into the midday, some of this action should break up a little bit, and we'll keep scattered rains in the afternoon forecast on Wednesday. But I think really the majority of the energy and the majority of the rain will be probably by or soon after lunchtime. Now, as we get into Thursday, here comes another disturbance. Now, it seems with the HRRR, it falls apart, working its way into Louisiana with just scattered rains for the afternoon on Thursday. Let's stick with that. So what I think we're probably looking at here is something on the order of maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain widespread across our area, combining Wednesday and Thursday's rains all together. 1 to 2 inches is certainly going to be manageable. Yeah, you're going to create more little nuisance issues in spots where the water hasn't quite gone down yet, but it's not going to be enough, I don't think, to make up for the drop in the water levels that we've had today and that we'll continue to see overnight tonight. So the footprint again has basically something on the order of 1 to 2 inches across our area. Look back over here in Texas though. You see the shades of orange to yellow. Now we're talking about 3 to 5 to maybe even 7 inches of rain through Friday for those folks over there. For us though, you see what this is what the Weather Prediction Center, basically the National Weather Service rainfall experts, their latest projection kind of has our area running from roughly, let's say, an inch or less along the I-55 corridor to maybe 2 inches plus, closer maybe to possibly 3 along the I-49 corridor, with Baton Rouge generally averaging maybe 1 to 2 inches of rain, with maybe a couple of pockets popping 2.5 or 3. All right, let's get to the rivers then. I'm going to run through about 5 sites here, and then we'll call it an evening. So we're going to start off with the Amite River at Denham Springs. See the big rise that occurred, but here's a couple of things to look for. And if you use these graphics, I want you to make sure that you think about these. The first thing we always have to kind of wonder about is how much rain is going into the extended forecast. Now, the Weather Service, the branch that produces these products, is the Lower Mississippi River Forecast Center, the NWS Lower Mississippi River Forecast Center, LMRFC. And generally, they use 1 to 2 days of rainfall for their forecast. So one of the things you always want to look for with these graphics is the forecast issuing time. So this forecast hasn't been updated since this morning. Now, I think we'll have an update certainly by later this evening, but this forecast is off a bit. And in fact, since I'm looking at that, let me just give a quick look here. I've got a second here. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the site there and just see if that forecast has been updated since then. And yes, it has. In fact, it was updated just a handful of minutes ago, but I had loaded this slide into my show. Now, here's what they've done. This morning, you'll notice that the forecast was above what the trend was in terms of the rising water. So the blue line represents observations. The purple squares represent the forecast every 6 hours or so. Well, here's what they've essentially done. They've simply changed these numbers on the forecast and connected them. So the forecast for Denham Springs is still 33 feet. I don't think so. I think 31 32 maybe is probably a better guess. And look, it's real easy for me to sit here and second guess these guys. But the bottom line is, even if it gets to 33, for most of you that watch the A-meet at Denham Springs, that's not a problem. I just don't think it's going to get here. You see the trend line, and I could see it getting maybe up to around 31, maybe 32 or so. Bottom line is, it's not going to be a big deal. And by the way, everybody north of Denham Springs, all of the forecast points along the river there have the river cresting below flood stage. The other thing to look for, not only the time of issuance, but exactly when that crest is going to occur. So here we're talking about the crest not occurring until Thursday evening. So we're still 2 days away. And in fact, as you go farther down the Amite River, those crests get later and later, so that by the time you get down towards Port Vincent and French Settlement, you could be looking at a crest that doesn't even get there until the weekend. So these are going to be for a while. The other thing that I'll sometimes look at, and they no longer put it on these graphics, is it would tell you whether it includes 1 or 2 days worth of rainfall. I haven't looked at that yet here, but the bottom line is I think maybe 33 is a little high, not a lot, maybe a foot off. And the good news is that 32 feet or even 33 feet at Denham is generally a pretty manageable number. All right, let's move on then. Next item I've got here is the co-meet at Jor. And if you were with us last night, I told you I thought maybe 21, 22, and that's where it's crested thus far. Now, expecting to see a little bit of a bump here from the rains that we had today, but actually the rains we had today were pretty insignificant, especially for the upper portion of the Comeet Basin. So the forecast to go to 24.8, that too, not updated when I loaded this graphic. That was made this morning. So let's go back and see if they've updated that. Going back to the site. And typically what happens is the Weather Service updates these graphics sometimes between about 8 and 9 p.m. in the evening. And I got these before the updates had come out. And here's the update at 8:10. And believe it or not, they are still sticking with a crest of 24.8. Well, I just don't see that at all, folks. Even if we get 1 or 2 inches of rain over the next couple of days, this trend downward is going to at least be flat for the next day or so. For it to climb another 4 to 5 feet between now and Thursday certainly doesn't seem likely. In fact, by the way, so they've got the crest 24 hours from now, which means that they're going to have to get a decent amount of rain in the basin tomorrow to drive that up 5 feet. Now, I don't think that's really going to happen. So let's say it gets to 22 or 23 feet. That's going to certainly be manageable for most of you out there. Yeah, I know that once you get above 20 feet, especially 21 and 22, some people have problems, but I just don't see it getting to 24.8 to near 25 feet. And then, and that would be tomorrow. And then the one thing about the Comeet, even at Jor, is that it tends to drain relatively quickly. Now, the drainage will be slowed, unfortunately, because the Comeet dumps into the Amite. As long as the Amite is up, the Amite basically acts like a liquid dam that slows the ability for the Comeet and all of the bayous and channels in EBR to drain, because the Amite's got to come down for those to drain steadily out. So short answer is, I think that the Comeet is I would not be surprised if that becomes the crest, 21.2, that occurred on Monday. But we may see it climb back up to around 21 or 22 with the rains we get over the next day or so. All right, next site. All right, going over to, now we're going to look at a couple of the streams in EBR Parish. This is Ward Creek near Inniswald, and bear with me for a second here. I want to disconnect just for a second. I left some notes I had, so hold on. I'll be right back. So hopefully I'm back on. I should be, the volume should be back there. Let me check with my man Josh and just make sure that we're back on. And So this is the Amite River at Ward Creek. Now, by the way, you'll notice none of these sites have any forecast data. So we're really kind of just shooting from the hip on these. But typically what we see with most of these streams is rapid rises, and clearly you've got that. And then the rate of fall is simply dependent upon how quickly that water can drain out of that channel, which means ultimately how quickly can that water get into the Amite. And once again, if the Amite is high, all of these local streams and channels and bayous are slower to drain. But we've had a pretty steady fall here. We'll likely see a little bit of a rise as we get more rain on Wednesday into Thursday, but I don't think we'll get back to 28 feet there at Ward Creek. By the way, the record there, and the other thing, by the way, to keep in mind is that some of these sites have relatively short records. For Ward Creek, the record is just under 30 feet, but that wasn't in 2016 or even 2001. That was way back in 1995. So this is one of the sites that has a pretty long and extensive record. And it is noteworthy that we got within less than 2 feet of the all-time record for that location because of the locally heavy rains that we had. And the other thing here is it's not just how much rain, but how quickly it came down. And that, in many ways, this event for EBR Parish, of course, the location is on the south side of the parish instead of the northern portion of the parish in 2016. But the other thing is, if you remember in 2016, we had what really was, you could almost think of it as hour by hour, 1-inch rainfall spread over about 20 plus hours. But in this event, we had 10 to 12 inches of rain in parts of the southern EBR Parish. But a lot of that compacted within about a 6-hour window. So the rate at which the rain came down was actually greater than the rates that it fell during the August 2016 flood. But the 2016 flood extended over multiple days with essentially rain each and every hour. This was just a jolt of rain packed up in a smaller window of time. So it is coming down. I think we'll see maybe another little bit of a rise at Ward Creek there. And by the way, it says near Inniswald. Basically, this is right there, I believe at Essen by Our Lady of the Lake. So we'll see another little bit of an uptick over the next couple of days, but it shouldn't get back to the level that it is or that it crested yesterday. Here we're looking at the Amite at Dawson Creek near Baton Rouge. Now this one is essentially Dawson Creek right there near Perkins Row. And in fact, last night as I was trying to make my way back from work, I left the station about 4:15 in the morning, and I typically take the interstate. And I get on the interstate and I get on Blue Bonnet and I'm right there and I'm realizing this is never going to work. And of course it didn't because I had to go under the train trestle there at Mall of Louisiana. And I've got a couple of pictures, although it was so dark I didn't bother to show them on air. But cars where the water was up to the hood that had tried to make it through the underpass. Now they probably stalled before. And in fact, I think there may even been an issue, a fatality there because the water was just so deep and it just kept building up. So anyway, cresting at, in fact, just above the all-time record for that location. Now that's a relatively short record, but the record there, 22.8, wasn't in 2016. That was in the 2001 Allison event. So it's falling. It'll be a slow fall because you get closer to Bayou Manchac and ultimately the Amite River. That's where you start having issues with waiting for the Amite River to go down. All right, here we are at Amite at Bayou Fountain. This is right there for those of you that know south side of EBR Parish. The Albertsons on Blue Bonnet, it's right there. That's where the gauge is. And you see there's actually been another little uptick here that has to do with some of the later rains. Flattening out though, I think, and we'll start to see maybe sort of a steady flow, or you'll see the river sort of sit steady for a while here, because now we're getting really close to the Bayou Manchac, where this is going to dump into. And Bayou Manchac is kind of in a steady state right now, or near that, because the amite is still coming up. Now, and keep in mind, when I'm saying Bayou Manchac, I'm meaning the bayou proper, which dumps into the amite. Bayou Manchac Point, the Amite River gauge where the confluence of Bayou Manchac and the amite occurs. Now that site there is still on the rise. We'll take a look at that in the middle. With that site on the rise, the best we could hope for is for Bayou Fountain to kind of sit steady while the Bayou Manchac sits steady while it waits for the amite to start to fall, which may not be until into the weekend. Down that far, not so much for Denham Springs. So here we are, and this is the last one I'm going to show you. This is a amite at Bayou Manchac Point. Checked in with our friend Pokey Delattery, the observer there. This is one of the last remaining manual gauges, and by that I mean an observer actually goes out, takes a reading, reports it to the National Weather Service. That's why you see these are the reports, and he's actually provided multiple reports today, because the real question now is, how high is the lower amite going to get? National Weather Service is going 12.5. My friend Pokey is going 12 even, roughly. I'm going under 12. I'm thinking 11.5, and you know, in many ways these numbers are relative, of course. The question is, will we see that much water come downhill along the amite? I think that certainly Port Vincent, you're going to be getting ready for flood stage. You'll go above 9 feet, I do believe. French Settlement expected right now to go above 5 feet, or at least reach 5 feet. That may be a little high, and a lot of that's going to depend on how the winds behave in the coming days. And then even on down to Maurepas. Maurepas, you're probably going to climb above 4 feet before it all gets said and done. And for our friends over on the Tickfall, yeah, the forecast at Liverpool and Holden, both calling for the river to go at Liverpool, I think just below flood stage. At Holden, I believe the forecast is 17 feet right now, which is 2 feet above flood stage. I don't think it's going to get there. In fact, I think Holden may just barely get to flood stage. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't get to 15 feet. So a little bit of good news there. But as you get downriver there at Killian, Springfield Killian on the Tickfall, I think there you need to be looking at the possibility of 4+, maybe closing in on close to 5 feet. Again, for you, just like Maurepas, a lot of it is going to depend on how the winds behave by the time we get into the weekend. Well, we just killed a good 30 minutes there, running through a little bit of the forecast update. A show of what we look at when we do these forecasts. And keep in mind, I want to say this one more time. It's really easy for me to sit here and say things about these forecasts, but it's kind of like the River Forecast Center, the LMRFC, Lower Mississippi River Forecast Center. They're doing all the heavy lifting, and then I get to look at their product and say, okay, it doesn't look like the river is behaving exactly the way they're expecting. And let's go back and give you a perfect example right here. And we'll just go back to the amite at Denham Springs. So at the time of this post, you can see that the forecast was well ahead of what was actually occurring. Well, it's no rocket science to say, well, if it's off by a foot or so, already, there's a good chance it's going to be an off by a foot or so at the end of the sequence. I'm looking at 4 rivers making those kinds of fine-tuned tweaks based upon a little bit of experience. The River Forecast Center is looking at 44 rivers across their service area. So they don't have the time to sit there and tweak each of these forecasts in between the forecast issuance. So this forecast came out in the morning. It's just been updated this evening. They get to look at it twice. I'm looking at it all day long. So it's really not fair for me to say, well, I got it closer than they did, because frankly, if I didn't have their data to start off with, I wouldn't even know where to begin. So hats off, and a big thanks to the folks at the River Forecast Center for doing the forecast, for the USGS and the Corps of Engineers who provide the rain gauges, the river gauges and the rain gauges to support the endeavor to try and figure out what each of these rivers is going to do, and to the other agencies, including the City of Baton Rouge, for helping to support the network here in East Baton Rouge Parish. So I'm going to leave it at there. I'm going to check on a couple of questions, and then I will see you at 10. Let's see if we've got anything here. Hey, look, folks, by the way, I appreciate all the... My sleeves are scaring you. Come on, Tammy. There's only 2 tucks here. This is when you need to be concerned. The other thing I do need to say is a big shout out to my team, Dr. Steve, Jeff Morrow, and Jared Silverman. Jared has been working from home during this event. Of course, you've seen Jeff. He's doing the noons and the early shifts during the afternoon, and Steve has been in here. We crossed paths last night. He's coming in as I was leaving. And the fact of the matter is I couldn't do my job without them and serving as backup and background and helping me get the things done that I need to do. So it really is a team effort here. So for those of you saying thanks, just make sure that you thank all 4 of us, not just any one of us. And it looks like there aren't really too many more questions. And really at this stage, the big question all of you probably have is, how much more rain and when will it end? All right, let's deal with when will it end. Could still have a few showers on Friday, but I don't think that's going to be a big deal, and certainly not, the way it looks right now, produce any kind of added water that's going to be a problem for flooding. Heading into the weekend now, I've got it dry for Saturday, Sunday, and through at least the first half of next week. And basically, I've got all of the next work week either dry or mostly dry. So we're going to get a good 5 to 7 day run of dry out. So for Wednesday, rain is likely, but not looking at big totals. Maybe an inch to some isolated totals, pushing in 2 inches. Now, friends down along the coast could see a couple of spots there, maybe get up around 3 inches or so. But I think for Metro Baton Rouge, we're talking about an average of about an inch to an inch plus on Wednesday. On Thursday, let's go ahead and just roundabout throw in another ½ inch on average. Now, what I mean by that is that some people may get just a couple of tenths, and we could see a couple of pockets of 1 inch plus totals, but averaged across the region, I think we're talking about maybe a ½ inch or so. So over the 2-day total, we're talking about maybe 1 to possibly the higher end for Baton Rouge at 3 inches. We're certainly going to be able to manage that. We just dealt with 15 inches in about 6 to 8 hours in some spots here. So more rain, yes. Rain likely Wednesday. I'm going to go ahead and call it rain likely on Thursday, although not a lot of rain. And then things settling down after that. And if you want to see another rehash of the forecast, I'll see you at 10. Thanks so much.